Later. Uh, I'm not one of the 17 people in the world who understands blockchain, along with the 6 people who understand theory of relativity. And my cryptocurrency account is really in bad shape. But I then looked at the panelists and I said, I think I can do this because I looked at the panelists and I said, if there's one thing I can do, is that I can work with really amazing people and then take all the credit. So I'm really counting on on doing that with this wonderful group of people out here. And our hope is that, where the topic gets a little cryptic, we'll try to demystify that. We'll try to break it down, both in terms of the technology part as well as the legal part. I can't promise that we'll do it perfectly, but definitely got a mix of people here that can take a good shot at it. So I wanted to start by, and maybe this has been done before, but to do a kind of 101, just to help people understand, when we look at a topic like this, when we look at, going beyond the blockchain, arbitration for cryptocurrency disputes, what does that mean? And some of you, it might be repetition, but I think we'll still do this. And then we can dive into the more detailed stuff, the good stuff, right? So let's start off with that, and I've requested Ashish, who's definitely can cover all the 101 topics, probably teach a course on it. But Ashish, if you can just start off with some context to break this down so that when we do get into the questions, that discussion becomes really inclusive. Yeah. Thank you.
So break down like how this technology is typed.
Yeah, maybe you could touch on the blockchain, and 18th person in the world will be there who understands blockchain. You could also talk maybe a little bit about how does cryptocurrency work on the blockchain. And I think the really big question, which is when we say disputes, cryptocurrency disputes, what are these disputes that are coming up? Arbitration, I trust everybody knows, but I think these areas would be really useful.
Yeah, I think I might end up taking more time, but I'll leave the disputes to the expert lawyers. Maybe
awesome.
I'll just
maybe
give
we
some
can ask Siraj or
business
Christoph
perspective because I am very close to the real life business on blockchain.
There's real life? This is real life?
This is real life, yeah, absolutely for last 2 years. So, I think the best way to explain something new is to equate with something old, right? Let's talk about internet, right? So how internet evolved. So internet is nothing but transfer of data packet from your phone to my phone. If you are sending some sort of message to me, Ashish, I'm going to take you out for dinner. So that will get converted into some data packet. It will travel throughout the world, and from your phone, it will come to my phone, right? So that works on a TCP/IP protocol, which is about 45-year-old, right? So it is just like a data transfer transaction recorded on a protocol, right? This is how the internet has been working for last about 45-50 years. Now, same thing is now getting on the blockchain, wherein the transaction from one computer, from one node to the other node, there is some transaction, and that transaction could be a financial transaction, that transaction could be recording of data, that transaction could be, let's say, recording of electricity grid output, anything which has an element of a transaction can get recorded on this new technology called as a blockchain. So TCP/IP, which is the backbone of internet, is now being replaced, not say replaced, but augmented by blockchain as a technology to record the transaction, and transaction could be anything. Now that's like a short TLDR of what a blockchain is. And if you understand Hindi, especially, we use the word bahi khata, like a ledger we use in the word of accountancy, right? So it is like the most authentic and most solid, non-reputable, non-hackable ledger which exists in a decentralized mode. That's more of a philosophical answer, but technical answer is the previous one. One myth which is there, and it has also come out a lot from the Indian government especially, and also from various government who are still resisting adoption of, let's say, crypto as such. They say, hey, blockchain is good, but crypto is bad. It is like saying that, hey, Infosys company is great, but Infosys stock listed on National Stock Exchange is bad. No, they have to coexist, right? So crypto is an incentive mechanism of that particular blockchain, right? Now, why do I, let's say I'm a very funky engineer, a very expensive engineer, Sundar Pichai, right? Why do I spend my time to build a use case on a blockchain, right? It could be some sort of a, let's say, some fan engagement for ICC World Cup. Why do I spend my time to build that use case on a blockchain? What do I get in return, right? So, crypto assets, loosely called as cryptocurrency, right, are the incentive mechanism for the developers, validators, and participants in the blockchain to make that blockchain successful. If I am employed with CoinSwitch, and if they do not give me stock options of the company, why do I burn my midnight oil to make the company successful? Okay? If they don't pay me my compensation, I am not a fool to really work hard even for 1 minute to make the company successful. So similarly, if I have to make one particular blockchain successful, okay, I need to have incentive. I'm a selfish person, right? Everybody in the world is selfish. They want something in return. That return comes in the form of a native crypto asset, loosely called as a cryptocurrency. That's the short TLDR, more over drinks and dinner.
Okay, that was
Along with some bitcoins.
that was pretty good actually. So Ashish, just one quick follow up because I'm putting myself in the shoes of somebody who's heard what you said. One is that one thing that strikes me is if you're talking about recording transactions, then you can imagine a lot of value in different ways. For instance, because it's useful to create records, right? That something happened. And the lawyers will know something happened is like 80% of litigation, right? Like affidavit, ye hua tha, isne bola, that person has seen, like something happened. And on here, I trust that here is verifiable proof something happened.
Yeah,
so one is that there is this
immutable.
huge opportunity to have a record mechanism, highly trusted record mechanism that says something happened. So am I imagining it, or
No,
does it strike me as being
correct.
quite widespread in terms of evidence and
Yeah.
transaction security?
Well, from a lawyer's lens, it's a messed up world, right? But from a tech guy lens or from a business guy's lens, it is like a great thing, right? Because why do people say that blockchain transactions are more authentic and immutable? Because they are decentralized. The meaning of decentralized here is that the same transaction, the same record will exist in multiple nodes, in thousands of computers, millions of computers, depending upon what is the baseline protocol of the blockchain.
So nobody has to stand as an authority. It is
correct.
present.
So if I fudge my laptop, my phone, right, then if you are also participant in the validation of the transaction of the blockchain, your record will be different. That is why, I mean, a transaction which is validated and recorded on a blockchain would have a lot more certainty and admissibility as an evidence. Yes, we may have to make some tweaks, in the evidence law, but it would be at an extremely high threshold as compared to some sort of police server and they are recording some sort of evidence.
That's super clear. One last clarifying question. You said that cryptocurrency is an incentive. It's what you get as a kind of reward or incentive for building these use cases on the blockchain. Why couldn't you be paid regular cash to build those incentives? Why not build something on the blockchain, but the money is regular cash to your bank account?
Well, look, I mean, I'm saying ultimately these cryptocurrencies get converted into cash, right? Let's say, especially in India, you will not go to Starbucks and say, hey, I want to buy a coffee by paying some sort of Bitcoin, right? You have to get cash. Now, why the cash is not used as a currency? Because when Infosys they issue shares, right? So it is a native kind of currency of a company listed on a stock exchange. So similarly, when you are creating a blockchain, the incentive by the design comes in the native crypto token.
Understood.
Right?
Understood.
Now you can sell the shares, get cash into your bank account. You can sell the crypto assets, get cash into your bank account.
That's super useful. Siraj, I want to just, the last part of that 101, what do these disputes that happen, these cryptocurrency disputes, by now we've had a track record of a few years where we've seen these disputes, it's no longer something that is alien to us. What do these disputes look like?
Thank you. So first of all, thank you to MCIA for the invitation to be here, and thank you all for staying so late to be part of this so that we have someone to speak to. So the disputes, just like disputes in the non-crypto world, there's a whole range of disputes that you can talk about. So I'll give you some examples. There are disputes between the users and the operators of the cryptocurrency exchanges, disputes between investors and future issuers of tokens, for example, disputes from interactions in smart contracts, and we'll get into these terms as we go. And then many of you would have heard of the metaverse, so there are disputes arising out of users of the metaverse suffering grievances. So there are a whole range of disputes. And I think what we're going to discuss in the course of this panel is some of the issues that arise with trying to resolve these disputes using arbitration.
Got it. And the moment you started talking about these disputes, I started thinking back to other network situations where you have disputes, right? I mean, so much conversation has been happening about ONDC and the fact that there's going to be lots of players that are connected via the network. The first thing that comes to my mind is one of the biggest issues that keeps coming up is the governing contract, right? Like, is there a governing contract? For instance, even if you look at networks like ONDC, there's a range of contracts, right? There's different contracts between different people. Some networks have a governing contract. Some networks have bipartite contracts amongst different parties. In my research in this space, this is a big issue here. The nature of the contract that is covering this, the cryptocurrency transaction.
Yeah, so the contract is important because it gives you an answer to questions such as jurisdiction, where you go to resolve your dispute, and governing law, which law you use to govern your dispute. And to use a simple contract where A contracts with B, you know who you're contracting with, you know where the dispute arises, you know who to sue, where to sue, what law to apply. Where we're talking the crypto world, where there is a master agreement, then those issues are generally governed in the contract itself. The problem arises where there isn't that master agreement. And because crypto assets, for example, exist as records on a decentralized network, you can't point to a particular jurisdiction where the assets exist or where the assets are held. And so, as a claimant, if you have a dispute, the question is, who do you sue? Or where do you sue? And for a defendant, the issue is you may then be dragged into a jurisdiction that you don't want to be in or where you have no familiarity. And so where and that gives rise to disputes as to jurisdiction. And courts try and resolve that by reference to conflicts of law principles. And that gives rise to another problem because conflicts of laws principles differ from country to country. And so you have a different set of rules depending on where you look.
And if I may just jump in there, I think even some very well-respected systems, I think the UK system, there's been judgments that have said that we have to look for the lex situs, and where, and they've come to the conclusion that the home of the person who has purchased the asset is the site of the transaction. And apparently this is something widely disagreed with by other jurisdictions. So it seems that the common understanding, is there a lack of common understanding around these jurisdictional issues? Is there a crippling lack of common understanding?
I think it's not so much a lack of understanding, but a lack of uniformity. I think different jurisdictions are looking at it differently. You mentioned the UK interpretation, but another jurisdiction may look at it differently. And therein lies the problem, because different people are approaching the problem with different solutions. That lack of uniformity is a problem. That's beginning to be addressed now. So, for example, in the UK, there's the digital dispute resolution rules, which have which are now trying to come up with some uniformity that parties can use. But therein lies the problem. And I think
I'll just add that he's absolutely right. There is no uniformity, and if you see that the core agenda of the G20 under the India presidency, where crypto was one of the important point on the table, it was how to align the world towards a common platform. One, to regulate, second, to recognize, and importantly, how to resolve cross-border, because it's not a cross-border. This is a borderless. There's no cross-border here. This is actually borderless. So he's absolutely right.
Yeah, I wanted to add, it is indeed a problem. And for example, in Germany, if you want to have a valid arbitration agreement with a consumer, then the arbitration agreement is not enough to have an arbitration agreement in your contract. You have to have a separate agreement, a separate contract. So the majority of cases I know, and the majority of terms and conditions of let's say, marketplaces where you can sell and buy coins do not comply with these requirements, right? So the question is, the question is how can you handle that as a marketplace? How can you offer coins to a consumer in Germany?
And what would be if you require a separate agreement,
Yes.
specifically for the arbitration?
Yes.
That means that you can't really have one, say, smart contract because how would that constitute a separate agreement?
Exactly. How can you implement that or kind of have that in your smart contract if it's not considered as a separate contract, right? I think it's a problem, but I'm pretty sure that the IT world can handle it, and that if the law and IT work together, then it's something. And also, I mean, there are initiatives in Germany and in Europe too, especially in Germany. I think the government has published its ideas for changes to the Arbitration Act to resolve that issue.
I see. Pawan?
So on that agreement piece, I also wanted to add one thing. There is another issue.
Can you just talk a little closer to the mic?
Is it on?
Hello.
Just tap that once. Yeah.
So on that agreement issue, I think that one of the factor which I want to add is that this is also questionable that whether such kind of contracts, the smart contract or whatever type of contracts through the blockchain we are seeing, those will be considered by the court as written contract or not. And at some point in time, those will be challenged on that ground also. That these are not the written contracts.
I see. Sorry, Smita, you want to say?
Yeah, there's only one point that I wanted to add with regard to conflict of laws principle. The baseline assumption for that is that every jurisdiction, even if conflicting, will have some law around that, right? There are jurisdictions who have not addressed crypto assets at all. In India, we do have certain aspects of it being regulated, in the sense there's something on KYC front, there's some bit around taxation, there's some requirement for disclosure. But do we recognize it as an asset class, as currency, as commodity? All of that discussion itself is all kind of up in the air. So that's why even if you choose a jurisdiction which is outside the country, how are you going to, what's your touchstone or reference point for resolving that? So that becomes very, very important. And, relaying it back to Ashish's point, that we need a common platform. We need that harmonization and some sort of uniformity in addressing how do you see or how do you categorize virtual digital assets across the globe. That's going to be important.
I see. And one thing that immediately jumps up is that where you have this sort of uncertainty, this lack of uniformity, this variance in terms of what constitutes a valid arbitration agreement or even a clause, I presume that's also where people try to innovate, right? Like, I think there would be a range of providers, platforms that would come up with solutions that sort of say, we can secure against this. Is that fair to say that this is a way in which entrepreneurs sort of respond to the uncertainty that comes up when you have things like this?
Well, entrepreneurs don't care about legal uncertainties. Sorry, I'm a bad man in the house, but I think they do care about the business and economic and social uncertainty. But I think let's divide this entire issue of dispute resolution in the blockchain world. And again, I'm a fan of trying to help understand newer concept with the older example. Let's say you want to transfer 100 rupees from your UPI to my UPI handle, right? Now, you are entering into a payment settlement systems, right? You may be on Google Pay, I may be on WhatsApp Pay, right? So when the entry gate of the backend payment system would have terms and conditions, right? But when you have clicked pay 100 rupees to ashish@whatsapp.com and whatever, then you are not operating on a written contract. You're operating on a code, right? Which is called a self-executable code. Once you have pressed in the button, unless the technology fails, you will be transferring 100 rupees to me. Similarly, when we talk about smart contracts, right? Smart contract is just a misnomer. These are self-executable code, right? That once you give the instructions to a code, the code will behave the way it has been coded by a developer. You cannot intervene in that unless you block electricity, right? Now, the dispute, I don't think will happen when the code has started to execute or validate or record a transaction. The dispute will always happen between you and the gatekeeper of that code. That is why you would never see any commercial dispute or arbitration between the user and a decentralized exchange. Most of the disputes happen between a user and a centralized exchange, wherein the centralized exchange is run by human being. They are the custodian of your crypto, like FTX. They will misuse it. There will be cyber hacking and stuff like that. You will have a grievance. You will have an entity, maybe in Bermuda, maybe in Seychelles, wherever to sue. Then you will go to expensive lawyers to find your. That is where these arbitration will happen. But when the codes start to execute, there's no arbitration.
But there are so many people buying off centralized exchanges, right? Yep. That is the reality today.
Well, I think more people are buying on decentralized than centralized. That's the reality. I mean, those who are novice, okay, you and me, we need to have some human curated. Like, I can't even go and buy a sweet shop unless my wife accompanies me, right? So we need some curation from human being to take some decision on which crypto to buy, how to buy, who to call, who to abuse. But I believe that 80% of the worldwide transaction in the crypto domain is happening on decentralized exchange, not on centralized.
So can I just follow up on that? So I agree completely. And to just take a step back, the problem here is we have a new way of doing things, a new concept, a new paradigm. But we're still operating on the old way of resolving disputes, right? We're still talking about New York Convention and the requirements under the New York Convention. And that is the problem. And I don't think, to follow on from Ashish's point, I don't think the entrepreneurs are going to be bothered about structuring their product to fit the legal structure. I think the onus is on the legal framework to innovate and to take into consideration these new developments, right? So I'll give you an example. If you're talking about a smart contract, which is executable code, right, a self-executing code, and let's say there's an arbitration agreement that's embedded in that code, is that a written arbitration agreement for the purposes of the New York Convention, right? And that may have implications if you need to resort to a court to enforce the outcome of that arbitration. It's less of an issue if the arbitration is, or rather the execution or enforcement is done on-chain. But that is the nub of the problem. You're trying to fit new concepts within old paradigms.
But these old paradigms are still very much in play, right? So I'm sure as lawyers you would see time and time again issues coming up which unfortunately are issues brought to the old paradigm, the courts and things. How do you, this transitional stage that we are in, how are you navigating that in your practice? Christoph, you? Yeah.
I had an interesting hearing, I think it was a month ago. It's a German litigation. And in that case, we're the claimant, and my party is claiming that the other party. We're not claiming he's a criminal, but let's say he promised a lot of things that he couldn't perform. And so I think what I've experienced is we don't have any specialized judges in those cases. And you really have to structure your briefs and really, I mean, in an easy way, explain how the entire crypto world is working. And I think it's not that easy. But however, the judges kind of tend to, and then that's for us as lawyers, right, to make it easy for the judge to decide on the case. And but yeah, I think we can get there, and that is where arbitration comes in, because you can have judges who are well educated in that area, and who know what a blockchain is, and who know what cryptocurrency is, and what that means, and what comes with it. And I think that's an advantage that should be used, because explaining that to a judge, it was possible, but a challenge.
Have you seen it? Have you seen examples of people coming up with solutions? I've been hearing about people who've built networks where the arbitrators are on the chain. They can edit the chain as well. They can ensure enforcement. I've been seeing some examples of this popping up, where people are trying to create solutions that are within the future paradigm. Anyone who can share perspective on that?
I would share another example wherein the system feels when everything is possible, but what will happen in the smart contract or the arbitration contract to the smart contract, wherein when the decision will be overturned because the notice was not sent. Like Ashish was saying, it is a code. Once code is written, the system will perform. It may be an on-chain arbitrator who will make a decision and return the cryptocurrencies or complete the transaction or reverse the transaction. But when it will be taken up to the arbitration, then that time maybe one small ground that the notice was not served. The decision was immediately taken without serving the notice to the other side. So I think somewhere the process has to evolve.
Yeah, I have to say that I agree. I think there are some solutions out there, these on-chain arbitration solutions. I wouldn't call it, I mean, in the sense of the New York Convention, I think it's not a real arbitration if the New York Convention kind of gives you the real arbitration. So in the state sense, arbitration, right? Because the right to be heard is a problem. The parties do not know what exhibits were submitted, at least from my understanding, to the arbitrators. You don't know who the arbitrators is, and there won't be any judgment that you can read. You just see the outcome, which might be that some coins get deducted from your account, and that is something which is not enforceable, and you cannot apply neither the UNCITRAL model law rules or the New York Convention to it. So I think there's certain things that these startups have to work on in order to make it more workable or more legal.
So actually there is a startup, not in India of course, so I haven't really tested them, but I was listening to a podcast, right, and I can share that with Neeti, and she can share with others. So this guy has actually built a decentralized dispute resolution protocol. So it's like you can submit your dispute on a decentralized blockchain. I forgot the name, but it was a very interesting 1-hour podcast, and I'm happy to share that with MCIA, and then she can share with everybody that way. That's like one of the innovation which lawyers partnering with engineers are bringing in, solving dispute resolution by using blockchain as a technology.
Can you elaborate on that? When you say they're solving using blockchain itself, they're solving on the blockchain. Can you just explain what does that look like as opposed to dispute on the blockchain going to traditional arbitration?
Yeah. So look, I mean, I haven't really used any platform, so my discussion would be more academic or as a curious guy as such. So I believe simulate. Let's say you and I are fighting that who owns this particular pencil, right? We have a contract, right, and we have some exchange of emails and all, and we want to now we are very funky lawyers, funky guys, and we want to go to the blockchain based arbitration, right? So what we do is that we will knock the door of that kind of blockchain protocol, hey, say that, we want to use your, say, okay, your case is started, ABCD 1 2 3 4 is a docket number, start submitting documentation, right? So I submit my proof, you submit your proof, because your arbitration is more, the evidence has to be in writing. It's not about trial court as such, right? So I submit, okay, my document, you submit your document. So each of the document would get a cryptographic code, right? Now, once I have submitted that document, I can't tamper that with. You can't tamper that with. And then they have plenty of arbitrators who are, let's say, for a Bitcoin, you need validators. You would need people who mine Bitcoin, who are valid in transaction. So similarly, you would have multiple arbitrators empaneled on the blockchain, and they would be totally anonymous. They'll say, okay, your facts will be sent to, let's say, 50 arbitrators. Anonymous. You will not even know whether they're in India or they're in Germany or US and all. So if you get 26 votes out of 24 from those arbitrators who have the same fact, non-tampered, you win the case. So that is something which I believe they are building, or they have built already. I share
think,
that.
Yeah, there's some very interesting models around this sort of jury, digital juries, where anonymously things are sent to a group of people. They've been using this system for machine learning in terms of training data. And now they're looking at these sort of voting systems for disputes and dispute settlement. Super interesting. So here you have a space which is changing almost every day, and you're trying to keep up, you're trying to respond to that. But let me ask you to put on your hat as just a futurist, looking out at how is this field changing. When you look at it, maybe I'll ask you, Smita, when you see these changes which are happening so fast, how does regulation respond to this?
So on that, Sachin, I think a straightforward response right now is that we are seeing positive changes. Speaking of it from the Indian context, until the G20 summit that happened, the Reserve Bank of India was completely against crypto assets and all, and there was a very clear-cut statement which was made by them saying that this is not something that we approve of. They did try to go ahead to the extent of banning it, and of course the Supreme Court reversing it, but after that no real concrete steps were taken. And then suddenly in August and September we see the Indian government taking the initiative and calling out to the world that let's put in a uniform framework for dealing with crypto assets and all. So we are seeing winds of change. We are seeing some form of a recognition that is being provided to these virtual digital assets and all. The key point that I still see, which remains to be sort of discussed, debated, or resolved, is the difference between, so wherever there's human intervention, whether it's a centralized mechanism, or if we are talking about stable coins or anything that operates within that regime, I believe touch points for regulations are easier. But the moment we get into a decentralized regime of dealing with crypto assets, which is nothing but you and I creating those blocks one by one, and a third party authenticating it, that really goes out of the domain for any regulator to regulate, and that part becomes tricky. I'm sure there will be innovation which will take care of it, but purely putting it in terms of what's happening and how do we see this evolving in the centralized space and in the stable coin space, we would see a few aspects that will come together. We can expect the FATF coming up with very uniform set of KYC standards that need to be followed by all the jurisdictions which are parties to FATF. Second thing is going to be around, and this is a reference that we can also draw from some of the other international institutions, what they have done in the banking domain. For instance, the Basel Committee, the BIS, putting forward standards for some of the prudential norms, settlement standards and all of that. So we can expect some of that uniform set of standards coming out, and then the industry taking cognizance of that and trying to sort of self-implement it. Because as much as it is important for the product to flourish, sometimes we have seen entities or participants in the ecosystem also take a step back, try to be more regulatorily kosher, so that it's not abruptly stopped. So that's also something that we have been seeing, and there is a need for an industry body. I believe there's Bharat Web 3 which has come in for some of the Indian exchanges, and I believe Ashish would be a better person to talk about that for on the advocacy front and things like that. Um, yeah, so these are some of the points
Thank
in
you.
which we
Thank you.
see. Yeah.
And just one thing to Siraj. Siraj, you're coming from a jurisdiction. I think you're from Singapore, right?
Yes.
And in Singapore, Singapore's tried to position itself as being at the cutting edge of, say, the arbitration movement. And are you seeing jurisdictions like Singapore saying we can address this issue? We can be the preferred place for. Because it is a significant leap. It's not like extending the same service that you had to something, because things are so different. The innovation demand is so high. But how do you see jurisdictions responding? Are there some that you're inspired by?
So first of all, Singapore wants to be the cutting edge for everything. Some with some success, some with not much success. But in terms of this, well, you're looking at arbitrations and you're looking at the courts. And in arbitration, what we've done is SIAC, the Singapore Institute of International Arbitration Center, we've gotten certain crypto entities to incorporate our rules into their standard contracts. But where I think there has been innovation is in the courts, because what the courts have done is they've tried to introduce or try to apply the existing framework to this new norm. So I'll give you two cases. There was a case in 2022, two cases in 2022, in fact. One where there was a party who had crypto assets stolen by someone outside the jurisdiction. And the courts allowed for the court papers to be served outside of jurisdiction on crypto exchanges and payment service companies. But they used very traditional principle, which is that these entities had assets in Singapore or had business in Singapore. There was a subsequent case where we talked about theft of NFT, non-fungible tokens. And the wrongdoer was known only by his online handle, so we didn't know who this entity was. And the court allowed service by way of the Twitter account, Discord account, and also on the crypto wallet address. And they also recognized that NFTs were capable of giving rise to proprietary rights, and that those rights could be enforced or protected by way of injunctions. So again, you see this this phenomenon of using existing legal principles and existing legal relief to help parties navigate this new landscape.
And I presume that even if, and I think that this is, coming back to the point that Ashish was making about the fact that how do you have a resolution framework that's actually future facing as opposed to, taking the old paradigm. Even if you take that, I think this increases the tolerance or the understanding of the of the system, so that even if you do start to see really next gen dispute resolution built right into these systems, even distributed systems, the courts are likely to understand it better, navigate it better. So even if they're not taking on the substantive disputes themselves, they're sort of not at least crushing something, because by then they'll have evolved principles to deal with it.
So there are two aspects to this. One is the actual dispute resolution, and the second is the enforcement of the result of that process. Now, if both those aspects are done on-chain, as it were, then there isn't an issue, right? The issue arises where you have the dispute resolution in the crypto sphere, but you then need to come out into and try and access the courts for enforcement. That interplay has not been worked out, and that's where you have problems.
Yeah.
So on the enforcement bit, I just want to take a minute on that. One of the things that's coming out as part of the proposed financial regulation is that the IMF has recommended that virtual digital assets will not have the validity of a legal tender. So that, really takes us back to who do you enforce it against? And that becomes a real moot point. So if we are looking at regulation, the regulation is mostly going to be around setting some standards on, monitoring and how to go about operating it, some form of dispute resolutions, not in terms of the ability to enforce a claim, but mostly contractual claims against the ecosystem participants.
Understood. So let me, Christoph, you want to add something to that?
I just wanted to add to your point, and I think it's, even if you have an on-chain dispute resolution tool, including enforcement, the question still is there a res judicata effect, right? Does it kind of hinder you from filing a claim in court, right? Is it binding? And maybe you have a contract. I think it's contractually binding, but not with a res judicata effect.
I see. So before I come to some closing remarks, there's a question I want to ask, which is, I think one thing that is happening, and I'm going to borrow something that was mentioned earlier, is that it's hard to, even to be a practitioner in this space requires a certain level of literacy, technology literacy, system literacy, along with the legal literacy, right? Like you need to have that aware. You don't necessarily need to understand the code, but you need to have that level of literacy, right? To be an innovator requires an even higher standard, right? In terms of you really need to be existing at the intersection of these worlds to actually understand what's possible. So there are these new demands on practitioners and innovators. How do you, and this is for everybody here, which is how do you, just want to hear from you, how do you develop your own capacity? How do you maintain your capacity? I'm going to start off with the practitioners and then come to you. But how do you, maybe I'll start with Smita, how do you stay at that cutting edge? Especially because there's so many craft demands, so many different skill set demands.
I think you need to work towards becoming that 18th person who understands blockchain. How do you do that? There are tools which kind of take you to the very basics of what blockchain is, and then you build on that as a lawyer in terms of applying your first principles. So, I mean, for me, how do I try to understand blockchain, or think about what's decentralized, what is centralized, what is stablecoin and all? I go to the basics. For me, it's kind of impossible to sit through a podcast of an hour-long postcard, look at videos and listen to experts, telling me. So I would rather prefer some sort of an animation just showing me the fund flow. And I would follow that, followed with some sort of, reading on topics, and that kind of helps me. And most importantly, I try to apply first principles and follow my instinct in terms of what's happening.
Thank you.
So let me add it here that let's understand the cycle the way I understand the cycle. So the story starts from a code, which Ashish said that it's a irreversible concept. Once written, then it has to be executed. But once code is written by some software developer, then it comes to when you want to, in blockchain it happens that when you want to alter it, modify it, then you need consensus. So, which means that if half people have agreed and half people have not agreed, then you are in dispute. Now, why the alteration and modification is required? So, that's the reason I'm just answering the question that how I do this study, that I just try to understand the flow. So, how the dispute, why the dispute is coming, why alteration and modification is happening. The reason could be different. In blockchain, the reason could be that somebody wants to upgrade the system, wants to change the functionality, add the functionality. The reason could be that there are some scaling debates. Scaling means like if bitcoins are in shortage or somebody wants to reduce the block size, then there is an adoption problem, because if you reduce the size, the adaptability will be impacted. Then there could be some other disputes like the arbitrator is trying to reverse the transaction and the others are objecting that this is a code is law, which means it is irreversible. You can't alter it, modify it. Whatever is there has to be executed. So here the dispute is starting. Now you need to solve the dispute. There are two mechanisms or multiple mechanisms, on-chain, off-chain. So if you go to on-chain, then there are legal issues. In on-chain, somebody can solve the problem. The speed, it can be expedited. The dispute can be solved with some speed. maybe instantly. The arbitrator may be given the powers to solve it, like you and I are in dispute, and the arbitrator must be given the power that he can complete the transaction or reverse the transaction. He can issue the cryptocurrencies if those are the subject matter of dispute. But again, it will be challenged in the court. On-chain has two major issues. One, Christopher said, is res judicata, which means you have applied for the resolution in on-chain, and at the same time you can go to off-chain also in court of law. And second one is that the order should be reasoned one. In on-chain it is not reasoned one, it is just done. There is no reason, there is no explanation. And in off-chain there are a number of problems. Certain jurisdictions are not accepting and citing the public policy issues, and they're not giving the orders in favor, or maybe not giving the right orders. And wherever the orders are being given, just as I cited one example, that if the arbitrator is given a rightful order, but still the order will be overturned because the notice has not been served, the order is issued. So this is how the dispute will be coming and getting solved and getting challenged in number of ways. So that's how I complete my way of understanding. To understand the entire flow, automatically I'll get my inputs about my legal arbitration.
Got it.
I think the first thing I'll do is ask Pawan for a transcript of what he just said,
That's
because
super
I think that was
useful.
extremely
Yeah,
clear
very
and
clear.
logical.
Yeah.
But you know, it comes back to what Smita said as well. You read up and you try and break it down to first principles and understand it. But where that fails, you hire someone young who understands the concept.
That usually works.
I just want to add, you said code is law, and that is a statement made by a Harvard professor. His name is Lawrence Lessig, correct, yes. And I think it's an interesting statement that was made in, I think it's based on his book written in 1999, and the article was published in the Harvard Business Magazine, Code is Law, in 2000. And that was a time when the internet was still something new, and you know, Napster was there, you could get music illegally, and everything was unregulated. And he drafted this article, which has an interesting idea and a couple of interesting ideas. And he says, you know, the regulator of the internet is the code. And I think that's true. And he also said that the legal profession and the code must work in tandem. So if you kind of look back at the situation, what he said, I think you can apply that to blockchain and crypto. It's new to us and it's a new technology, but I think when the regulators they are picking up in Europe, they just introduced the MiCA regulation, which is a regulation for cryptocurrencies, and I think then we kind of lose the fear of the new things in our life.
Thank you.
Yeah, three things. Number one, lose money in crypto. Okay.
Best way to learn.
That pain will really force you to learn a bit more. Okay, continue losing, but that's one. Number two is that make friends in the tech domain, right? Because our life is only just dining and drinking with lawyers. That's not going to help you. Make friends with some good techie guys. Understand their language. They will help you learn this subject matter more than anyone. And third, I think, just be present in the world, right? Attend all these conferences, be on Twitter, follow right Twitter handles. I mean, I would say that 90% of my understanding of, let's say, crypto, what's happening in India, outside the world, has come actually from Twitter, following tweets, and following some gurus, following some institution, then, on the street. So three things: lose money, make friends with tech, be on Twitter. Yep.
Be on Twitter. Great. Yeah. That's really helpful. And I remember being in a conversation with Pramod Verma. You might know Pramod Verma, who is the architect of Aadhaar. And he was saying that, he said, there's a really big shift, and I don't think lawyers have understood this shift, and maybe lawyers have, but what he said was that there was a time when everything used to happen offline, and then you had to prove it happened or didn't happen, and who did it and who did not do it. And so much of the practice of the law became around doing that. And now, when so much is happening digitally, what happens to all of that? Why can't you re-engineer the entire system to produce verified information, to produce credentialed information? Why can't you build new systems based on that credentialed information right there and then, instead of taking it offline and then having to deal with that? So I want to end by just getting some last one thought, 30-second hot take from everyone. And the question I want to ask you is, one aspect, how is this going to most profoundly change your own practice? When you look at your own work, the work that you've been doing, and you think of the next 3 years, what do you think in your practice is going to be the biggest change because of the evolution of this space? I'm going to start off maybe with whoever wants to go. We'll popcorn it.
So I can just start by saying 3 years, I want my stock option to be 100x. That's it.
Okay. That's pretty straightforward. That's what you want. I think it's the practitioners who are like, what's going to happen?
I don't think there's going, this might be controversial, but I don't think there's going to be revolutionary change in the dispute resolution sphere over the next 3 years. I think it will be incremental. I think people are still trying to find their way around this. But I don't think it's going to be revolutionary. I think it's going to be a process that will take some time.
Got it. And you think it's that second part that you mentioned, it's the enforcement where it's still going to have to be navigated, have to be negotiated?
I think people need to work out how you transition back and forth between these two worlds.
Yeah. Online, offline, but also resolution and enforcement.
Yeah, no, resolution and resolution and enforcement, online, offline, and how they interact.
Got it. Thank you, Siraj.
So I was listening in the previous session also about the downside of AI. So adding to that and continuing with here, what I am going to do is that somewhere I need to work on responsible AI. And second is that I need to understand some level of coding so that I can help the smart contract to be drafted the way I want. That could be the next level of
Understood.
Skill has to be.
So going from the practitioner to the innovator, right?
No,
I mean those worlds sort of get compressed, right? Which is now you're drafting the contract in a way that it actually becomes the enabler of the system.
No, if people like Ashish are there and somewhere without me knowing as an arbitrator, I need to have the smart contracts drafted in such a way that I can win the arbitration.
Okay.
He's saying that in future contracts will not be written, contracts will be coded. So it's like understanding the coding would be as essential as you understanding how to operate Microsoft Word.
Correct.
For me, I'm a fintech and banking finance lawyer, so it doesn't really change a lot for me. What it does change for me is that it makes my life easier in terms of use of DLT or blockchain for some of the property related documentation that will go on. I don't need to do those cumbersome title due diligences anymore or look at those reports, because to the extent there is authenticated self-verification that's there, which is good enough evidence, it just makes my life easier. It helps financial services a lot in terms of KYC related efforts which go on and how cost sensitive they are. So I see financial services booming. I see BNF booming, and that makes my life great. More work.
Yeah. Christoph?
I think a main problem that human beings have is when there's new technology, or something new in their life, the question is how do they get along with it, right? And so I think the technology is there, but we have to work with it. And I agree with what you said. I think when it comes to the profession of law, we have to accept that there's a lot of development within a short period of time, and we can work with that and actually make our life easier. But still, there's a lot of people who are kind of reluctant to use the new technology, and also how kind of the dispute resolution world will change depends on how people are willing, and that is something that we could also listen to in the panel before, is how they apply the new technology.
Yeah.
say from an India perspective, and it's a news as recent as I think couple of days back. I think there's a good bright future, and the testimony that things will change for good. And testimony is that the National Financial Think Tank, I think NIPFP, right, which is under the aegis of Ministry of Finance. So they have recently opened up a job requirement. They're hiring lawyers with background of crypto assets and blockchain. So this shows that 2 years back it was a taboo, it was to be banned, but now they're hiring lawyers. Whoever is interested can go to their portal, apply, and just make sure that you do the right thing for the country, make right regulation, educate the government well, so that this industry grow. So this is the first small step which I as a lawyer could foresee, because government is hiring lawyers with those skill sets.
The joke is that I know the hiring manager who put that up, and she was complaining that she wishes she hadn't put it up because the applications she's gotten, she has no idea what to do with them. They have no connection to cryptocurrency, law.
Just give her a tip that you say that along with that, send me your crypto wallet address.
That's very
right? And not in 64, digit bit, in a domain name kind of stuff.
Right.
So I think the application will get reduced by 98%.
That's what I think will also be worrying. But I think to close, we'll say that we are entering into a space, into a time when multidisciplinarity, intersectional work becomes absolutely essential. To really operate, you have to have the ability to go into the technical side, and the technical side doesn't only have to be digital technology, but whatever it is. And you have to cultivate that mind that bridges and is able to bridge. And I think that's going to challenge our education system and our university system in a very big way. Because you've got these separate law universities that aren't sitting in the middle of a broader multidisciplinary university. And that was good one time, and now maybe that's outlived its purpose. So just want to thank you so much, everybody, and we'll quickly take a couple of questions. Yes, right back there.
Yeah, thank you for such an interesting session where it's keeping me here and not having the drinks. So kudos to you all. I have a comment question as not as an innovator, but as an arbitration practitioner who loves to innovate in the space of our arbitration clause. Right, so Siraj will relate to it. For crypto disputes, the trend that I have seen with some of my clients is what they are trying to do is to resolve issues of conflict of laws, to resolve issues of jurisdiction, to resolve issues of seat and governing law by sort of over-engineering their arbitration clauses. That often obviously does not resolve all problems. But the comment that I have is, isn't there a need somewhere to have, taking from this discussion, to have a homogenized system of figuring out crypto issues? Because you have a situation where, so for example, Ashish, to manage the risks of a particular company, crypto issues there'll be issues of mass claims, there'll be issues in respect of, there'll be one blockchain, and there might be sort of jurisdictional or some kind of disputes along the chain, and then that will pass through different jurisdictions. And then you have different laws in respect of arbitration clauses. For example, in India, you need to stamp your arbitration clauses. In Germany, you mentioned that you need to have a separate arbitration clause. So while we as arbitration practitioners sitting in these conferences are trying to figure out how to draft our arbitration clauses and think of conflict of law issues and how to resolve issues in metaverse, there is a need for actually the regulators across jurisdictions to come together and specifically address how to manage crypto disputes or blockchain disputes. So, I don't know.
Spot on example to what you are saying, because crypto disputes come in various form and shape. But I think to your point, one example is, let's say, when you are validating a transaction, let's say on Ethereum blockchain or a Polygon blockchain, right? So you have the validators, right? Now, if you successfully validate a transaction, you get rewarded with the new Ethereum, tokens, right? But when you have to enter into the validation pool, you have to do called a proof of stake. So let's take example of Ethereum protocol, right? You need to stake 32 Ethereum before you can enter into the validation of a Ethereum transaction. Now, if you mess up, right, you will lose 32 Ethereum. But if you do well, you may gain, let's say, 5 Ethereum. There could be dispute whether the way you have validated the transaction is accurate or not. If your Ethereum are burned, 32 Ethereum, 1 Ethereum costing 1.5 lakh, so you are down 50 lakh rupees, right? 50 lakh rupees in 5 minutes you are down, right? So those disputes are very difficult to be addressed in the traditional form of arbitration. Like Pawan said, the dispute resolution itself is coded. It is the validator community who would decide whether you have done the right validation or not, right? I don't think it will be solved in the current form of arbitration because the dispute happens when the code starts to run. So that's the live example. You can Google it and you will find out a lot of debates happening on the same dispute because in 5 minutes you are losing 50 lakh rupees.
Sorry, Ashish, I had a fundamental question on that, and just it could be ignorance as well, or a naive question, but I would ask. So, when we are talking about arbitration, it necessitates two parties, right? If I, as a user of cryptocurrency, right, if my code, if the authentication is not, or the validation was not done properly, who exactly is my counterparty in a decentralized
I wish I would have the question because this is decentralized. You have the word decentralized and anonymous. See, it's not decentralized and de-anonymous. It is decentralized and anonymous. I see the only thing which you could have is that somebody, you can't file arbitration, you can file a civil suit, you can file a criminal suit, ask for discovery, the courts will find out with some investigation, hey, Ashish Chandra is the one who coded for the Ethereum protocol, or he was in some party, he said that he is a validator, oh, catch him. So, it's how you catch the money trail in the money laundering. So that is how I think things will surface out, but you will not know who is a counterparty unless through investigative techniques you get to know. Yeah, because this is decentralized and anonymous.
But Ashish, on that point, but there would be consent to arbitration then, right? Even if you investigate and you find that it's Ashish Chandra and he was the validator, arbitration comes down to consent of parties. So there you have a basic issues in terms of resolving. Right?
Like I said, when you are in the code, then the traditional arbitration doesn't work. When you're outside the code, you are talking to the gatekeeper of the code. The arbitration work between you and the gatekeeper, like between you and Google Pay. But when you say, I want to transfer 100 rupees from my UPI to Ashish Chandra, okay, UPI, it's in the code. Then arbitration won't work. Maybe RBI guidelines on payment settlement protocols may work, but that's centralized.
I think we're at time. But any last questions from folks? If not, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And please have your drinks and food. Other detailed questions and hot tips from people can be taken over drinks. Thank you.